somebody is more melancholic, they're older, they've had a stroke, I might use tricyclics, versus if somebody is anxious, has OCD features, I might use SSRIs. Or if people have gone through a number of different trials of different meds, I might use MAO inhibitors, which are parnate and Nardil, and being kind of from the baby boomer. I mean, we use it, but people coming out of schools don't use it because of the diet restrictions, but they're very minor. And it's an excellent antidepressant that you don't see people using. And it works a little differently. Then there's Wellbutrin, and then there's Rexulti that you use with that. Then they're coming out, we'll be talking about a couple of the new things they're coming out with in terms of use of ketamine. There's a ketamine clinic, 2 of them right in Montpelier, which works on the NMDA. And the research on that is incredible. People who are highly suicidal, they take that, a nasal thing, and their suicidal thoughts go right away, immediately. It doesn't last long though, so it's kind of a maintenance. So there's a lot of variations, but primary care doctors do a very good job of trying to manage that, but they don't know the intricacies, of, just like I would know the intricacies of, what a cardiologist would do, They might not know the intricacies, primary care doctors, and they do the best they can. That's when, they kind of hit the wall. They'll refer to consultation for psychiatry. Yeah. So the yeah.
But then I just have a lot of pain. But then now I'm getting like a lot of hot flashes.
A lot of what?
Hot flashes and a lot of sweating at night.
Yeah.
But she told me to go on a hormone replacement.
Yeah.
That she's given me, so I'm going to try.
Okay. Was that your OBGYN provider? Okay, yeah. Yeah. Effexor is a good medication. It's a tough medication to come off.
She's given me something else to take to try and help control some more of the pain. But
yeah.
all the stuff I'm taking, I just don't want to go on estradiol if I don't.
Yeah, no. It's a SNRI, and Effexor is not used so much for duloxetine, Cymbalta, and some of the tricyclics are used for treating neuropathic pain and pain in general, that the neurologists will use, primary care providers will use as well.
You're on your seat.
We're ready? Okay. Good evening to people who are here and virtual audience as well. Tonight we're going to be talking about some of the complementary type of treatment options that can be very helpful in just overall physical as well as mental health. And what I'll present, a lot of this is based on neuroscience. As I've said on Tuesday night and I've shared on Wednesday night, it's very important that it's based on some type of science, okay, that we can refer to and what have you, because it's more believable. Instead of, saying, oh, it's, this, the breathing exercise you do, Jim, that doesn't make sense. I tried it, it doesn't work. That's maybe true for that person, but I'll talk about breathing exercises and how it's done and what it is affecting in terms of the nervous system and how it helps in that way. Actually, I was just reading or viewing a presentation on functional neurological disorders, which are like conversion disorders, that somebody has been worked up, they can't, let's say they can't walk, you know, their legs paralyzed, but they've been worked up numerous times, MRI with all type of muscle testing and everything, and you can't find anything. And it is a neurological disorder, and we base that on neuroscience. I won't get into that, but if you tell the person, we can't find anything, and it's something that's happening to you, but there is no biological basis to it, well, that's not correct. And if you can come from a neuroscience perspective, you can validate that person's experience, which is very important, and yet provide for them the right type of treatment. And it's not medications, it really is cognitive behavioral therapy. So what I'm saying is neuroscience is the basis for these treatment options that we're going to be talking about today. And I do want to mention, we had some handouts last night, and for the virtual audience, if you're looking for any of those handouts, I would ask Pastor Tom for that, okay? Here we go. So we're going to be talking about it's not moving forward. Okay. Okay. Did I go too far? Yeah. So this idea, I don't know if you've heard about it, and I don't want to, it's a fancy term, but neuroplasticity. When you think of something that's plastic, it's bendable, right? And think about our neurons. You know, I'm not saying that they're bendable, but really neuroplasticity means that the ability of the brain, if you will, to compensate. So say if somebody's had a stroke and their right side has been affected, why do they go to physical therapy? To use as much of, and gain as much of their motor movement as possible? That's true. But the area around the stroke, and I won't get into the fancy term for it, but the area around the stroke, there are cells there that are still working. And what happens is those cells will begin to take over that area of the brain that has been knocked out. You see me? Do you hear what I'm saying? So an example of that, say that somebody had a stroke on the left side, okay? And their face over here, they can't feel anything, you know, and what have you. And they start crying, and they tell you, you know, I can feel tears going down my right side of my face. Well, that's because certain areas of the brain now that were close to that stroke have taken over that function, if you will, okay? It's no different than if somebody, phantom leg pain, if they had their leg taken off and they said, I'm having incredible pain in my lower calf muscle, but they don't have a leg. Well, that area around the brain that managed, if you will, oversaw, if you will, that left leg, those cells, if you will, begin to assume control of that area so the person can feel pain. They can literally feel pain in a leg that they don't have. It's called phantom leg pain. And so those are examples, if you will, of neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to change and adapt. And that's why you go to physical therapy. That's why you go to occupational therapy. That's why you go to speech therapy. So you can retrain, if you will, your ability to do that and allow adjacent areas of the brain to begin to assume those functions. So experiences and memories change a brain's physical function. Brain functions move from, this is what I'm saying, from a damaged area to an undamaged area. And it's called a penumbrum, okay? It's the area around where the stroke has happened, and all that cell area and neurons around that begin to assume, if you will, that function which has now been lost. So I have this handout. It's called Brain Maintenance for Adults, and we had to just kind of chop it up in 3 areas. The individual who put this together, I met, probably about 23 years ago at a neuropsych conference, and he's a neuropsychiatrist. And he was working with mothers who were addicted during their pregnancy. And so after they had their child, what he brought them through was a neurological course, basic and understanding. I've shared some of those kinds of things in terms of the images. He brought them through a neurological course of how the brain works. Okay? And he wanted them to know that so they could monitor their infant and their child as they grew up and understand possibly the effect of their addictions, be it opioids, be it LSD, be it methamphetamine, it doesn't matter what it is, heroin. He was educating them about brain maintenance specifically to help their child. It was a really, really good program. And so this is part of his programs. Normal sleep, we talked about that. We need that sleep. Every night we need to structure that sleep, and there's a major, major consequence when we don't sleep. Fatigue, poor performance, and what have you. Regular exercise, physical work. I mean, think about this in terms of your second wind. You think about that with runners and what have you, that your body releases these endorphins, okay, and these dopamine as well. But you see this here, this thing called Bdnf. It's called brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's very important in the neurons in terms of developing neurotransmitters, hormones, receptor sites, and what have you. It's kind of like the miracle grow. And exercise is an excellent way of, enhancing this miracle grow, if you will, that's in the brain. So very, very important in looking at exercise, and we'll look at that as well. Outdoor time, we were made to be outdoors. We were made to enjoy the outdoors, simply looking at the trees, the mountains, and what have you. And I'll be talking about some mindful techniques as well that will address when we're outdoors. For instance, I try to walk every day when I'm at work during lunchtime, at least 15, 20 minutes. And when spring comes, I work at Gifford Hospital. Up at those grounds and all the streets around there, they have lilac trees. And when I go for a walk, that's what I focus on. I focus on my olfactory bulb, and I anticipate looking for that lilacs and what have you, and that does this to me. It quiets me down, it helps restore me, and it brings back my focus. Nutrition, I mean, clearly that is so important in terms of eating a proper balanced diet, and the better off it is if you can eat more of what we were initially created to eat, but if you're going to eat, flesh food, chicken, turkey, and fish, trying to stay away, as we know, from red meat as much as possible, but managing, what you eat, you are. And a structured lifestyle is very, very important. And I talk about this all the time with depressed people. I think we gave a handout last night, or maybe I'm going to give a handout tonight where I will have patients who are suffering from depression structure their day, whether it's by every 2 hours, whether it's by an hour, to help them have a purpose, have a scheduled activity to do versus just sitting there and not doing anything, okay? Regular work. This is so important, having meaning and purpose in life. Rewarding yourself regularly, you know. One of the things that I always encourage people to do who are studying and what have you, your brain is such that don't go and study for 3 hours in a row. Your brain's not going to absorb that. There's a time when you're going to cut off your studying. It should be around 10 o'clock at nighttime. However, when we are studying, we should study for 20 minutes and then take a break, walk away from that. And what I would encourage people to do, eat an apple, you know, have some water, go out for a little quick walk, then come back again and study that area that you just studied. And that's the way it's called long-term potentiation, where your nerve cells will connect better, okay? If you expose it to something, then give a space to it, if you will, give some time in between, and then go back and review that. That's no different. I guess a good analogy to that is if you're exercising and, you know, doing a lot of anaerobic exercise with weights and what have you, I don't think that there's any weightlifter that will focus on his biceps or her biceps every day. They don't do that. They, will alternate that, and your brain works the same way. This is an interesting one, isn't it? Getting in tune with your values and priorities, be it your spiritual beliefs, your views and values around family, work, friends, and what have you. That's essential, especially when you're going through a crisis. That is the anchor, if you will, that helps us get through those very difficult situations. Prayer and meditation. We know through some of the studies that have come out about individuals who meditate, who have been meditating for 10 years, they're able to achieve what we call gamma waves much quicker than I could ever do, okay? But it takes practice and what have you to be able to learn how to meditate. Treat each person like you want to be treated. That's the golden rule, right? Because what it says there is that if I'm treating you, okay, love your neighbor as you would yourself, when I really am treating Pastor Tom here with kindness, with empathy, with understanding, without judgment, do you know who I'm really treating? I'm really treating myself. I'm really treating myself. That's called mirroring. And we have a part of the brain that's called the insula. They're mirror cells, okay? They're mirror cells. So what I share with somebody else, it's reflected back to me, okay? Did you get that? They're called mirror cells. And so this notion of love your neighbor as yourself, indeed, you are loving your neighbor, you're taking care of your neighbor when you reach out to them. And you are the one who is benefiting from that, if you will. Practice forgiveness every day, a letting go. And that is something that really is necessary in terms of being able to not only just let go, but if you hold on to something like that, you know, that you don't let go, you don't want to forgive, it becomes a bitter pill. It is poison. And instead of this brain-derived nootropic factor, that won't happen, okay? When you're bitter like that, you're creating inflammation. Remember, we talked about inflammation. You're creating inflammation in your brain, and you're not letting go. So here it says, negative emotions circuits hijack the brain. They do. They do. You can't get away from that. And you're not really affecting the other individual as much as you're really, if you will, hurting yourself. Practice gratitude every day. And we're going to go through, hopefully, if we have enough time, we'll go through a gratitude exercise. And I've talked about this, exposure to violence. You are what you eat, you are what you hear, you are what you see, you are what you do with your hands, okay? And if you're watching a lot of violence, your brain is registering that. It's affecting that area of the brain that I talked on Tuesday night. It's called the emotional area, the limbic system, specifically the amygdala, which has to do with the fight, flight, and dealing with threat, rage, and anger. And so when you expose yourself to that, you are going to have consequence to that. This idea of learning something new every day, that has to do with neuroplasticity. I made sure today, no, it was Monday, I made sure on Monday that I re-upped in my organization called Neuropsychiatry and Clinical Neuroscience and what have you, so I can get the journals and I can get the presentations. That was one of the presentations I was looking at today, so that when I retire, I have retirement coming up, I can keep my brain exercised. And I find when I'm focused and I'm really straining to learn something, my brain becomes stimulated. Instead of sitting there watching TV and doing something that's very, very benign. So, if you don't use it, you lose it. That happens with our muscles in terms of atrophying, right? Same thing here. And I tell this in working with families who have loved ones who are demented and what have you. I said, expose them to as much as you can that they can understand, because you're activating, stimulating brain activity and what have you. And look at this. Learn about your brain system, okay? And I differentiate the whole idea of you have your brain, but then you have your consciousness and your awareness, your mind, that needs to tell your brain what you want it to do, okay? You have to use your mind to tell your brain, this is what I want from you. And I think it was on Tuesday I had mentioned, we've got the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, we've got the front of the brain, the back of the brain, we've got the top of the brain, the bottom of the brain, then we got all these other nucleus that are in there, and our job is to be able to connect that, okay? So to learn something new, I don't care if you've never taken up the violin, but you've had an interest, take the violin up. Say you want to learn Hebrew, go and try to learn Hebrew. That's tough, and what have you. What you're doing is exercising your brain. You know the labor that it is if you're trying to learn piano, or you're trying to, say you're trying to learn a hobby such as crocheting or whatever it is, and the labor that you have to invest in doing that, and it takes a lot. That means your brain is exercising. That means you're making neurons connecting, and it gets easier as you practice and practice and practice. So the whole idea of learning about your brain but exposing yourself to something new is so important, and it provides vitality, if you will, to how your brain functions. Why don't you feel normal? Keep doing normal things. If you had a bad day, keep doing your normal things. A lot of us focus on our emotions, huh? We focus on our emotions. Ooh, I just don't feel, up today, and I'm not going to do this. If you base what you're going to do on your emotions, okay, you're going to be led astray. Okay, that's where you use your mind and tell your brain and say, okay, I validate this, my feelings is such and such. However, I still have to go, I have to do the shopping, and I have to do the laundry today, and I'm just going to go with that flow despite how I feel. And I'm not talking about if you're physically ill or anything like that, but I'm not going to depend on my emotions. And we depend too much on our feelings and emotions. They're helpful, but we have to really, use the front part of our brain and let that be the determining factor about how we're going to experience our day. So deep breathing, okay? So we talked about this notion of the fight-flight response, okay? And we talked about that a little on Tuesday and yesterday when we looked at the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis and what have you. So if I were to see a snake here, what would happen is that's a threat, okay? And right away, part of my brain will send down signals to the pituitary gland, which will send signals down, right to my adrenal gland, and I'll get ready for fight or flight. And what will happen is my pupils will constrict, my muscles will tense, I'll have shallow breathing, my heart will start to go. That's the sympathetic nervous system, okay? Did you get that? Okay, that's the sympathetic, ready, fight or flight, or freezing. The parasympathetic nervous system, okay, that slows down the heart, that slows down the blood pressure. We've got these baro and chemoreceptors that measure, if you will, our blood pressure. It slows down, if you will, it makes our muscles relax and what have you. And that's what deep breathing does in terms of being able to quiet your physical response, okay? So as best as I can here, it's called diaphragmatic breathing, okay? And they use here 4, 4, 6. Sometimes I'll use 5, 6, 7, but let's use 4, 4, 6, okay? And diaphragmatic breathing is this, okay? Your diaphragm is here, and you have your lungs. When I breathe like this, what did you notice for those who are here in the audience? What did you notice? Shoulders up. I'm not getting good air. Watch how I breathe. I'm going to make myself pregnant, okay? I'm going to make myself pregnant. They say a man can be pregnant. They're getting into all this pregnant people, which is, I won't say anything about that. But anyhow, here we go. Here we go. Watch this when I breathe. What did you notice? My belly came out, didn't it? That was pulling my lungs down, okay? So 4, 4, 6. I'm going to breathe in 4 seconds. My stomach will balloon, if you will, or my belly will balloon. I'm going to hold 4 seconds, and then I'm going to let it out very quietly 6, okay? It's 4, 4, 6. This is diaphragmatic breathing, okay? And watch me. Okay, let's do it together, okay? Okay, you got to put your hand on your belly. Come on, put your hand on your belly. Okay, put your hand on your belly. We're going to breathe in 4 seconds and only breathe bringing your belly out, okay? Not on your chest, not up here on your shoulders, your neck muscles. Here we go. And your hand should go in. Were you able to follow that technique? Okay. Did you feel any warm sensation? I feel a warm sensation when I do that, right here. You may not, and what have you. You can learn to do that 4, 4, 6. If you want, you can make it 5, 6, 7. I use sometimes 5, 7, 9. The thing about that is you can then accompany another sense with it. When you're letting your air out, okay, you can let it out very, very quietly and use your auditory, your hearing, to hear that, okay? And what you're doing is you're focusing your brain, okay, right there and then, okay? So you're adding a mindful technique as well as doing this diaphragmatic breathing. You're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's not in your chest. It's not here in your shoulders. And I'll have patients do it in my office, and we'll go through a number of repetitions, and I'll see them they go up here, and I say, okay, let's try it again. It's the belly. It's bringing out the belly, holding that air, then letting it out, and then your hand should go in. That's diaphragmatic breathing. And then you could add almost anything to that if you want to have quiet music in the background and what have you. And what that will do is that'll slow down the pulse, that'll slow down the blood pressure, that'll help relax the muscle tension that you're experiencing. Okay, this is progressive muscle relaxation. Are people familiar with that? Pretty simple, okay? What I do is, patients are sitting there. These are exercises that I give them. They have to go home with them. I'll give them a handout and say, you gotta use these, okay? Practice makes perfect. And basically, it's progressive relaxation. I have them start with their feet. I have them tense their feet up, only their feet. For 10 seconds, then I have them let it go. Then I have them tense up their calf muscles. 10 seconds, let it go. Then I have them tense up their quads. 10 seconds, let it go. Then I have them tense up their gluteal, their butt. Then I have them tense up their gut for 10 seconds. Relax. Then I have them clench their hands 10 seconds. Then relax. Then I have them tense their forearm and their biceps. 10 seconds, then relax. Then I have them tense their neck. And sometimes you can't do that without your face as well. So you can do the neck and face, 10 seconds, and then relax. And then I have them tense up their whole body. And then relax. I feel very relaxed right now. Okay? You can combine that, do the breathing, and then I'm going to do the progressive muscle relaxation. Okay? And your body will relax. Your body will relax if you practice that. So that's called progressive muscle relaxation. Okay, mindfulness. I'm going to come to a different slide that, here we go. Grounding techniques. Same thing as mindful techniques. So you have 5 senses, right? You have visual, hearing, taste, smell, and tactile, okay? And so you can use those senses to help just quiet you and to help focus you, okay? So you can start with any of the senses, but you could say, okay, what are 5 things you can see right now? Okay, Pastor Tom, what are 5 things you can see right now in this environment?
You, the screen behind you, the graphic, the podium, the speakers around you, and the windows.
Okay, let me ask you something. As you were doing that, were you thinking about anything else?
I was looking at you and thinking, I was focused on you, but
Okay.
thinking about the specifics.
So it holds true that you can't chew bubble gum and walk at the same time, can you?
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah, you can't. And the thing that's so ironic is that when people are getting interviewed, they'll say, well, I can multitask. And when I used to hire people, I said, oh, this is not good. Multitasking is not good, Deanna. It's not good. Your brain has been created to focus on one thing. Huh? Not on this and this and this. That's our industrial world and what have you. So the grounding techniques is, let me look at 5 things at this moment in time. Now, what are 4 things you can feel right now, Deanna? Tell me 4 things you can feel right now on your body. Okay. Yes. Okay. There you go. Okay. So when you were doing that, were you thinking about paying the bill or worried about going home tonight in the snow? Okay. So 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can feel. That's our tactile sense. Did you want to say? Yes, yeah, tactile. And by the way, there's so many gadgets, you know, squeegee balls, and kids used to have these, I don't know, these little like triangles that they would spin around like and what have you. There are so many gadgets you can do tactile-wise. And when people were cutters that used to cut and wanted to feel that, I would say, why don't you put an elastic around and just kind of snap that if you need to, without having to cut so you don't get an infection or anything like that. There's a lot of tactile things you can do, yes.
Concerning the sling, because I don't want you to have to go off on a tangent, but I've had to deal with some young people struggling with that, and what I always thought was they've gone through so much pain to feel something, they cut themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. I mean, essentially that is. It's replacing what the emptiness that void that's in there is more unbearable than to feel physical pain, okay? And they're just expressing that through physical pain versus processing that through their thoughts and what it is they're experiencing and what have you. So these techniques would be helpful for them. So, 5 things that you would see, 4 things you would feel. What are 3 things you can hear right now? What are 3 things you can hear right now?
I can hear the buzzing from the equipment. I can hear every ear ring. I can hear a man up front asking me what I can hear.
There you go. There you go.
What else?
Okay, that's
Tapping the seat.
3. It's fine. Fine. Okay. What are 2 things you can smell, Deanna?
I can still smell some of my perfume.
Okay. What kind of perfume you wearing tonight? Estee Lauder. Okay. I used to, when I would go away to conferences, I'd always get Mary. I'd go to a fancy perfume shop, and I get a Le de Temps or Jeu de Vin, Mont Blanc. I'd always bring a nice perfume home for her. So you smell 2 things, okay? And we're going to talk about the olfactory bulb in a minute here. Hopefully we'll get to that. 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can feel, 3 things that I can hear, 2 things that I can smell, and what's 1 thing right now that you can taste? You can taste. What kind of gum you got going?
It's, I think this one is more peppermint.
Peppermint. Okay. 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 So that's a grounding technique. You know, using our basic senses. What did I share with you that I'm going to be looking? Well, I'll be retired. I don't think the lilacs will be out. I always would look forward to the lilacs, and on top of that, I would not only use my olfactory bulb, I would listen to the birds, and I would know. Oh. Yeah, that's a chickadee. Oh, that's a cardinal. Oh, yeah, that's a white-breasted nuthatcher. You know, I would be listening to the birds and the songbirds that now are returning as well. So I was using 2 senses just to quiet myself. And when I would walk, I might use tactile. What I would do is I would really want to feel my feet as my feet were touching the ground, and my motions and everything, and I'd want to experience that. Those are grounding techniques. In addition to that, you could almost do anything. You could say, okay, I'm going to think of 6 countries in Europe. What it's going to do, it's going to take your frontal lobe, and it's going to do this. It's going to focus, okay, you on a certain subject, just like your senses are. So you can use these categories of things, animals, sports teams, cereals, I mean, you name it. You could use almost anything. That's more of a cognitive type of grounding technique. So I gave everybody a self-care assessment last night, and I don't know if anybody got to use them, but in that self-care assessment, there were all types of ideas in terms of physical care. And you can, identify where are you with this. I do this poorly, I do this okay, I do this well. I would like to improve on this. But notice all the things in terms of self-care that you can do. And we've touched on some of them, if you will. And that's what this self-care assessment is, not only to assess where are you here and where would you like to get improvement, but to give you ideas as well. So we look at psychological, okay? Participate in hobbies, express my feelings in a healthy way. Let's see, find reasons to laugh, okay? Overall psychological and emotional self-care. Social care. This is so, so important. And I touched on this in terms of how we, as infants, and our connection to our nurturing mothers and fathers, and making that bond is so important. And socialization is necessary for brain development. We need socialization. Without that, we won't develop those mirror cells. We won't develop those mirror cells. And you're familiar with autism, are you not? And what's one of the major issues with autism. Connectivity to, yeah, to connectivity. And that part of the brain, I wish I had brain up to show you where the insular area is. It's an area of the mirroring that I can mirror back. And we see in terms of a functional imaging and measuring oxygen and measuring metabolism of glucose, if you will, in that area of the brain. It's hypofunctioning. It's not functioning. We know through studies that an individual who has autism, do you know where they focus? They focus on the face right here. What's missing? They don't focus on the eye, the eyes. They don't focus. And individuals who have autism, you know, the connectivity, they seem like they're in their own world. That does not mean they're not intelligent.
What is it when they get overstimulated? What is that? How does that happen? What's happening to them that causes them to get overstimulated? They get out of a noisier.
Yeah, I mean, what happens to you when you get overstimulated?
Normally we can take a lot of variation, but I've watched autistic and with those with Asperger's, they just cannot handle the level of, they got to get to a quiet place to recover.
Exactly. The stimulation is just too much. They don't have any breaks to slow down that response, okay, in terms of their emotional response, in terms of their thought process as well. For instance, when I went to San Antonio here in November for a conference, I live up on a mountain. There's nobody up there. And my eyes were tired when I was in the city of San Antonio. Why? It was too much stimulation for me. It's like, you know, I've never seen that many cars. People are coming and going, you know, all the activities are happening and what have you. My brain was overstimulated, and it really fatigued me. And it could be a lot of things that might go into why somebody becomes overstimulated. But yeah, lowering the stimulation is very, very important. But this idea of social self-care is so important, you know, keeping in touch with old friends and what have you. You know what we don't do anymore? We don't write letters, do we? Do you remember the day that you used to write letters? Huh?
Emails are the closest thing to it.
They're so boring, aren't they? Texting. But remember when you used to get a letter? You could sometimes smell it. You open it up, it might be in a colorful paper. You look at the handwriting, and the person's writing their personal thoughts down to you and what have you. And my wife saved all my letters that I sent her, all the cards that I sent her. You know, it's up in a box in our closet. She sent them all. And we don't write letters anymore as a way of contacting others and what have you. And I think it's a very personal way to engage socially, even if you're not there with an individual. Okay. So spiritual care, you know, spending time in nature, God's creation, certainly meditating and prayer, recognizing that things that give meaning to my life, you know, spiritual and self-care, appreciate art that is impactful to me, whether it's music. I can't read what that says there. I know this is literature or film. I love to collect art. I collect paintings, I collect all these things. And I recently collected a beautiful bronze atelier of Juliet, and she's bending over here like this. And I put it right on our big counter, and it's there, and it can spin, and I turn it, and I just look at it, and I say, where am I going to put this, Jim? And so I was saying to myself, just leave it there, Jim, and you can look at it any time. I really appreciate the artwork, the delicacy. I look at the hands and the fingers of that ballerina that's bending over, and the position, the hair, the flow of her hair and everything. That's, I think, appreciating another individual's talent that has been given to them by God. And so I think art, and for me, I love art, and I just collect art. whether it's for the color, whether it's for the scene, or whatever it is. But there are so many things we can do in terms of that, and recognizing that, you know. Set a time for thought and reflection. How often do we do that?
I do it when I take my walks. That's when I do
Okay.
the most. I'm getting the blood flow, and I can think through challenges, and
Very good.
it's my time to really process.
Now, the other thing is, when you do thought and reflection, how do you begin to narrow it down so you're not like popcorn thinking of, you know, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this. How do you kind of slow that down so you begin to narrow down what you really want to think about, you know, and concentrate? You know what I do to help with my thoughts? Certainly I read the scriptures, and I'll take a little piece of it and I'll read it. For instance, let's say the lepers and the leper that comes to Christ. What I'll try to do is imagine, what was that leper like? What did he look like? What was his face? How much of his hands and his nose was, you know, atrophied because of the disease and what have you? What was Jesus like in terms of how he was looking at him? And really break it down, put it into context. That's really narrowing the thought process down, and I think really reflecting and looking at what could happen. And a lot of times we read things, we read the scriptures, and we just read right over them, and we're missing all these jewels. The other thing that I like to do too is poetry. I love Robert Frost. And if you go out in nature, I encourage you to read Robert Frost's stuff, you know, like Two Look at Two. And it's about the experience of a man walking through the woods, and all of a sudden he looks across, and there is a deer, and he talks about what it's like for him and the deer to be looking at each other, or the babbling brook. He just, you know, makes alive the things that, you know, we in this beautiful area may take for granted, you know, the snow. Tomorrow morning when we get up, and if it's sunny out, what's going to happen to that snow? It's going to melt, okay, but what's going to happen visually when the sun hits it? Huh?
It's going to glisten in the
It's going to glisten. What colors do you see, Deanna? Sparkles, rainbows. Isn't that beautiful? It's so lovely. And to really just sit 3 minutes, 5 minutes, just embracing that, versus saying, oh no, here's the snow, I can't wait till spring comes. I got to go shovel it. Oh, I got to do all of this stuff. Embrace what's right there. That's using your mind to tell your brain what you want from it. You got to use your mind to tell your brain what you want from it. Don't just let it kind of ramble on, go down the railroad track, if you will. And professional self-care as well. You know, improving my professional skills, taking breaks and what have you, learning new things, as I mentioned, in my profession, in your profession, learning new things, so important, staying on top, looking at the research and what have you. All of these things are so important in terms of the self-care assessment. So as much as this was given to you to be able to assess where you are with that, it also gives you ideas that you might want to look at as well. And for those people in our virtual audience, we handed these out last night, and we have extras here, so I'm sure Pastor Tom can give you that if you would like copies of some of these handouts. Some tips for setting SMART goals. You got to be specific. They got to be measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, okay? And that's so important. Sometimes we put too much on challenge and not enough on success, and there needs to be a balance. But you have to specify that. You have to look at what it is that you want to do. Oh, I want to learn these breathing techniques. Okay, I'm going to set a log out. I'm going to do it 3 times a day for the next 10 days, and I'm actually going to put first day, second day, third day, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, at the end of 10 days, I can measure, did I practice diaphragmatic breathing, if you will, okay? And you can measure that, so it has to be specific. Is it achievable? Can you do it? I mean, you don't want to put an expectation that's not achievable. It would be problematic for you. And is it relevant? I mean, does it have some meaning, and is it going to have some utility for you? Okay. So this is a structure that I might, kind of a structured activity that I can give to a person if they have a very unstructured life. And I can't, I'm amazed at how many people that come to see me that have so much unstructured activities in their day. And I always talk about structure, 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 structure. This is a nice tool to be able to structure yourself. So these are some tips and what have you. We've gone over that. Here's the gratitude exercises. As I mentioned before, the brain-derived neurotropic factor is a very important, I think it's a peptide, definitely a protein, that's very important in terms of cell growth. If we didn't have this, our brains would not be functioning. And gratitude and being appreciative and being thankful is so important in terms of brain mental health. And can we use that in terms of something we want to practice on? What can I be thankful for? Is the glass half empty or is it half full? It's half full, but depending on our perspective, it can be half empty. And that is a negative impact on ourselves. And so you can do this in terms of so many different ways. I mean, if you go to Shaw's, and there's a lady that I'll pick if she's there. She's probably about in her early 50s. And I'll look down the line, and she's not there. I'll look for who's the fastest so I can get out. But if she's there, you know what I do? I go to her. You know why I go to her? She engages me. How you doing? Da-da-da-da-da-da. And we talk, And she said, oh, you got that on sale. That's great. It's a social encounter. And I'm very thankful for her customer service. I really appreciate her, And what does it feel like, Deanna, if somebody opens the door for you? Doesn't that feel good? It's amazing. If somebody opens the door for me, they're waiting, and they see me coming, and they're holding the door. I say, wow, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, I have this, about its 20, 25 feet rule, okay? And if in my periphery, I see you coming through the same door that I'm coming, I'm going to pause, and I don't care if you're a man or if you're a woman, a kid or what have you, I'm going to wait and say, and hold that door for you. And it's very, very rare that somebody will say, what the heck you doing there? They'll say, thank you. They're having a real bad day. Or it may be helping them in that bad day. Think about giving thanks and appreciation for something as simple as that. I mean, really. Or somebody smiles at you. It doesn't have to be big things, but again, it's telling your mind to tell your brain, hey, recognize that, Jim, that somebody held the door for you, They waited. They could have just slammed out the door and what have you, okay? Now, on the other side of that, if somebody goes through the door and they don't even hold the door for you, now don't go and focus on, why didn't that guy hold the door for me, or what have you. You see what I'm saying? So some things that are very simple in terms of how we can be appreciative of it, appreciate that is very, very important. And there's that grateful contemplation. Is there something today that you're grateful for? The smallest thing, Deanna.
I'm just grateful that I have a warm home,
Yes.
comfortable,
Great. Pastor Tom, is there something
I'm
specific?
grateful that you paid the price to be here 3 nights in a row to make this happen. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm grateful that the lady I got on the line to re-up on my prescription, I was able to get a hold of her, and she was the most helpful person. And she said, Jim, did you get the hardcover of these journals? And I said, no, I didn't. We're going to get them to you. And she was just so helpful. And then she goes and said, I says, well, I'm going to be retiring, and I don't know how often I'll be making it to the neuropsych conferences. She said, oh, I want to let you know in July, we're going to have a conference in March. All of them will be taped, videotaped, and prior to July, you'll have to pay. But after July, Jim, you can look at them for free. I was gleeful and how. And then she goes on and says, since you're retiring, you'll have emeritus. I can't remember the word she used. I can't even articulate it. But she says, you're going to get a cheaper price when you join, again, the association next February. I said, thank you very much. I'm going to save, let's see, $100. I'm going to save like $120. I didn't even know about that. And she provided all this information. I was so grateful about that. You know, I said, she didn't have to do that, but she did. She did. So, yeah, think about some basic things that we're grateful that happened during the daytime. It's amazing what that can do in terms of lifting your attitude, lifting how you might experience yourself, okay? Now, this is the daily temperature reading, and so the pastor wasn't aware of this, but what I'd like to, I'm not going to do this, we don't have enough people to do that, but when I work with couples, okay, this is an excellent technique. So maybe down the road, we can do a presentation for couples and have some couples here and what have you, and look at communication techniques that can help in terms of engaging, the wife and the husband and the wife and what have you. And for anybody, we could look at that. There are a number of good communication techniques, really hands-on tools that people can use that I've used over the years. And one of them is the daily temperature reading. And basically what it is I have them sit across from each other and say something of appreciation. Wow, last night, Deanna, that stew you made was excellent. And you put a little cilantro in it. You never did that before. I really appreciated that. Basic things like that. New information. We need new information, okay? Oh, I forgot to tell you that they're considering giving me a promotion. It's new information that I'm sharing to somebody else in a relationship. Then puzzles. Gee, I thought you were supposed to call me this morning after you got to work because it was snowing on the roads, and what happened? I still have a puzzle. What transpired that you weren't able to call me and let me know? Complaints and requests for change. I struggle with the idea that, you're supposed to be taking care of the telephone bill, but I noticed that we were delinquent, and was there something that happened that you weren't able to take care of that? And so I'm wondering if we can talk about that so that you can look at making sure that you're going to take care of the telephone bill. Wishes and hopes and dreams. I hope that next week they're having a presentation up at the Barry Seventh-day Adventist Church on meditation and prayer. And I was wondering if we can set up some time so we can go there. And it's a very simple thing you do every day, and I would give people a card with these steps, these bullets on it, and I would have them practice daily with each other until it became automatic. Every day. Every day. Every day. Every day there's an appreciation, would you agree? Every day there's some... Just socialization, engagement, and instead of burying something, that I have this frustration with you, It's there. I'm putting it out there. I feel, I think, I, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm not kind of burying it so that when kind of things really get heated, I don't take my Tommy gun out at you and not only talk about that, but I'm talking about what happened on Wednesday, what happened 2 weeks ago, what happened last month. And by the way, last Thanksgiving, a year ago. You see what I'm saying? And it helps communicate, it helps engage, it helps make an individual aware. Because, you know, he created us, and he created us such that, you know, a wife and a husband, they're one. But they're also separate, are they not? And there needs to be flow in that relationship. There needs to be, you know, bringing in oxygen, if you will, and newness into the relationship. So it's an excellent, excellent technique to use. It's mindfulness. We'll go on for this, okay? And this is talking about exercise in terms of anaerobic exercise, pretty clear, versus aerobic exercise. And you start out small. You don't have to, you know, say, I'm going to be running a mile. No, walk. Walking is just as good as running, and I'm going to walk for 10 minutes today. And I'm going to walk for 10 minutes every other day. And next week, I'm going to make sure I walk for 10 minutes for 5 days. And then you up that. And again, you can set up a plan for yourself. And then you could measure that. Okay. Cindy's not here today, is she? Oh, Cindy's not here today. Okay. Let's see. Huh? I got hyssop, I got frankincense. I could have brought the whole shebang. Remember I shared with you, olfactory bulb is the most primitive sense that we do have, okay? So at MIT, okay, Judith Amores, she has developed this technique, okay? This is coming out of MIT, okay? And you can see this is like, what do they call these? Like a necklace? Is that what you call it? Women wear a necklace. And it's a tube, okay? And it has a nice necklace, okay? So you could almost say, oh, gee, there's a picture in here or what have you. There's an essential oil in there, okay? You wear it around your neck. And I think it was your wife the other night saying, you know, when I smell things, it brings back memories. Okay? There's a reason for that, okay? And this is another way of relaxing yourself. This is another way of shifting your attitude, what your thoughts are as well. And it can be, how many people remember, is it up there? Yeah. How many people remember the smell of Play-Doh? Huh? Yeah. How many people, I think I mentioned Tuesday, and I was driving home that evening, and I said, what was that artist? He would come in public school, he would come in once every month, and his name was Mr. Morrow. And we got a box of crayons, those real thick crayons. You know, remember the real thick crayons? And he was the most pleasant, joyous art teacher you could ever imagine. I can see his face now, and he'd be smiling, and he'd give us this box of these crayons, and I can remember smelling the crayons, huh? And it brought back a good memory, a good memory. And those crayons didn't break either. You know, the thin ones they have now, they break. These were nice thick ones, Crayola crayons, huh? But smells bring back good memories, if you will. And we all have them. If I were to ask you to just reflect and think about some of the memories, some of the smells that you have, you would associate that, likely have associated that to a situation, a person, and what have you. Okay?
Different seasons trigger different memories and moods.
Exactly.
I kind of remember Deja Vu, like, wow, it's the wet soil in the spring. I can see
Yeah.
it brings back a plethora
Yeah. But you can, if you stop and think about it, you can connect that actual literal smell, olfactory smell, to a thought and bring back an event, if you will. So here's the olfactory bulb, okay, right here. And it's we smell these various volatile organic compounds, be it oranges, be it whatever. And it's a physical smell, but it's turned into then an electrical smell, okay? So important. What would it be like if you, if somebody made a really nice, let's say, a nice basil tomato soup and you couldn't smell it? What would that be like eating it? How many of you go to a fancy restaurant when you get a cold? Why, Deanna? You can't taste it. I'm going to waste my money. I can't taste the stuff. I can't smell the stuff, okay? Smell is so important. And here's this olfactory bulb. It's fancy and what have you. Remember I told you those hippopotamuses? Okay? Here's the olfactory bulb, okay? And it connects with this loop. It comes around and connects with this loop right in here called the hippocampus, okay? And as I told you before, the hippocampus is so important in terms of novel learning, what we learn. That's where it's all stored in information. And by the way, I'm going off on a tangent. I have to have one tangent tonight, okay? He had mentioned what a deja vu is, okay? A deja vu feels like I've experienced this before, and you can almost follow it by as it's going along. You say, oh, this is going to happen next, this is going to happen next. You know what that is? You have your working memory, okay? You're storing something. And as you're storing it, you're taking it out of storage. Did you get that? So as I'm experiencing something, I'm storing it, but I'm taking it out of storage, so it feels, or my experience is, I've been there before. Very, very interesting. And it's a disconnect. And Cindy had asked me, what about the people who have these different experiences in terms of disconnection syndrome, such that an individual who might have a disconnection syndrome, when they see the number 3, they feel a triangle going down their throat. Isn't that weird, different? Or somebody who has had a stroke, and all of a sudden they can speak German, and they're Irish. How do they start speaking German? We're wonderfully and beautifully made when you think of the savant, okay? The savant who can't cook an egg. Put him down at the piano, plays Tchaikovsky, plays Beethoven, plays, my favorite is Chopin. He plays Chopin, a nocturne of Chopin so beautifully, and just plays it without, isn't that? I can't imagine what it's going to be like when our brain is fully restored and what we're going to experience. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be beautiful. So back to the smell. You're wondering, why is he doing all of this? Okay, so here's some essential oils, as it's called aromatherapy. Okay, so Judith Amores created this use of essential oils, and she made a necklace, okay? And this necklace is connected to a sensor, if you will, that will pick up blood pressure, will pick up pulse and muscle tension. And when that get to a certain threshold, those specific criteria, what will happen is a spray will come out of essential oil, and you will smell that. And so what if that essential oil you like is rose? What if it's lemon? What if it's lavender? What if it's frankincense? I have some frankincense. Excuse me, virtual audience. I'm just going to have each of...
Oh, yeah.
So I'll put it on your... here we go. Oh, Whoops. Whoop, that's a lot. Sorry.
All right, I'll let her smell it later.
Yeah, there you go. Very good.
I'll rub it in now and put it over.
So what does this smell like? It's a strong smell, is it not?
I smell wood, I smell
Yeah, woodsy, like
petroleum,
Petroleum? Okay.
sort of a mint.
You will begin to really, I'm sorry,
that smells.
cedar?
That's
Okay.
why I'm saying petroleum is more of a
Yeah.
cedar smell.
This is not adulterated. This is a pure essential oil. And remember when the kings came to visit the Lord, they brought what?
Frankincense.
Myrrh and gold. Why did they bring frankincense? Any reason why they brought frankincense and myrrh? They're antiseptic. Didn't Mary just have a baby? Didn't they just cut the umbilical cord? Were they not going to be traveling down to Egypt? And if you read in, I believe it's Exodus, I forget the chapter, if you read in Exodus, only the high priest would make this concoction of cassia, frankincense, I think it was cinnamon. They would use that in the temple. Why would they be using that in the temple? What was happening in the temple? What was the priest sprinkling all over the place on the blood of an animal? And that's quite the thing, huh? And they would also make a concoction of onyx, frankincense, and use gum. And they would use that to put that on the altar of incense as symbolic of our prayers going up. But I'm also saying, gee, it must have been like putting a floral spray in the sanctuary, given all the smells that were going on and what have you. So this is a technique that I saw at a conference down in Arizona, and it's a great place to go, the MIT Media Lab. The use of smell. It's I love frankincense, and what I'll do is I have some in my office, and when I'm talking with patients, I have various kinds, and I'll say, you really need to think about maybe this is an avenue for you to understand, to use an essential oil. They can be very, very helpful, and for a lot of reasons. The thing about when people are depressed, remember we talked about seasonal affective disorder, okay? And what happens comes, well, towards the end of September and, well, all the way through. It comes before then, but really much more to a degree as we get into November. What happens to the daylight? Shortens. And what happens to you when the daylight shortens? Is there anything that happens to you? I know what happens to me. Okay, you might get anxious because you're not having that light come into your preoptic nerve to make melatonin. You feel tired. Feel tired. Don't want to do it. I'm kind of, You know what happens to me, Deanna? I notice I'm not as sharp. My brain starts to slow down, which is a different kind of tired. It's a more cognitive tired. I just,
6 o'clock feels like 9 o'clock.
6 o'clock feels like 9 o'clock. You less motivated, less initiative, You kind of get more sedentary. Let me just click and turn the boob tube on. And what?
I go to meetings anyway, so that doesn't matter.
Okay. But you can get a light box very, very cheap. You can get them on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, or we have what they call a front porch in the Northfield area. You can look or ask for one, but they're around there so reasonable. And I always people who have depression, but on top of that have superimposed a seasonal affective disorder. They get kind of a double whammy. But even if people have just pure seasonal mood disorder because of the shrinking of daylight, I said, look, why don't you get a light box, you know? Let them know what it is, you know. You begin to titrate yourself how much you're using, you know. You can be doing any other task and what have you. And you got to stay with it, okay? You really have to stay with it. It will help you. A light box will help you.
So it does help.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Remember, there was a sitcom or whatever called Northern Lights, huh? And it was these people that lived up on, way up in the Antarctica there, up in the northern hemisphere and what have you. And they had well, what happens during the wintertime? How much daylight do they get? Maybe about an hour, 40 minutes. And so it was kind of a takeoff that they were in the midst of no sunlight, and all the villagers walked around with hats and had lights underneath it to get the light that they needed. It was hilarious.
So the most beneficial time is in the morning?
You don't have to do it in the morning, but yes, you can do it in the morning. Start out with 10 minutes, you know. If you're sitting there and you're having your breakfast and you turn it on and you're eating the breakfast, or if you're having your morning worship and reading, you know, start 10 minutes and then build from there. Remember about setting goals. Make it very specific, make it very measurable, achievable, and what have you. You know, and set up a little log so you can monitor yourself. But a light box is very, very helpful. I recommend it all the time. Visual. Okay, what did I put here? There's the light box there. She's got a light box. It looks like she's got a cup of tea there. And you can be reading, you do almost anything. They're very, very reasonable. Okay. So I just want to give you just a sense of some of the neuromodulation that's happening and that we're doing and what have you. This is called vagus nerve stimulation, where we'll, not me, but what they'll do is they'll put an electrode, okay, that will be in their vagus nerve, but it will go in an area of the brain that releases all these neurotransmitters that are important for electrical communication in the brain: dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and what have you. And it's a pulse generator right here. And this is I know that sounds scary, but this is no different than if somebody has a pacemaker, you know? It really isn't, okay? So there's this that goes on. It's called rapid transcranial magnetic stimulation, where basically they're using magnets as a way of stimulating brain activity. It doesn't go as deep, but it is effective. And usually it's over, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, about 35 treatments that happen, okay? And insurance companies are paying for this, if you will. There's electroconvulsant therapy. I started the program up at CVMC a number of years ago, and they've really fine-tuned it so that it is the gold standard for severe depression. And I think I've mentioned on Monday, I've seen people who are catatonic. They're like Lazarus. They're almost dead. And, you know, 3, 4 treatments, and they're coming alive. It's miraculous. And I know you might think it's very barbaric, but if somebody is in that state of stasis, they're going to die. They're going to die. So we use electroconvulsant therapy. And then this is called deep brain stimulation, okay, where they will take these leads and they will put them down into an area of the brain that has to do with mood and what have you, and it will be stimulated by these, if you will, pacemakers that they put here. By the way, you should know that when they put these, they're really monitoring on imaging and everything to make sure it goes in the right place. And the person's awake when this is happening. You can't feel any pain. I know it kind of seems, ooh, and what have you. But these are for individuals who are really having a resistant depression. And I'm not going to get a lot into this slide, only that ECT is much more effective than any antidepressant that is out there. So then we have cognitive behavioral therapy. Given the time, I'm not going to get into a lot of this. This is a quote from an author, Ellen White. "The will is the wellspring of all your decisions and actions. The mind and nervous system gain tone and strength by the exercise of the will." And in therapy, people don't talk about the will, okay? And she says in a book that she wrote, Steps to Christ, if we could only understand, I'm paraphrasing, if we could only understand the power of the will, okay, about your decisions and what have you. That's also connected with belief. And I'll say this, that I didn't mention last night about medications. I tell patients, I said, you have to believe this medication's going to work. If you do not believe this medication's going to work, it will not work. I said, you have to have some faith that this medication is going to work and that you trust that we can work together. I always say that to patients. Some studies are coming out of Harvard now, okay? You know what a placebo is, okay? It's a sugar pill and what have you. They will use a placebo, tell the patient it's a placebo, and it's going to help them. And guess what? It helps them. Belief is so important, the ability to believe. I didn't put that study there. I saw that presentation down in Tucson a few years ago, and what have you. This is this cognitive triangle, that previous proverb saying, as a person thinks, so is he, she, if you will. And it's a very vicious cycle, you know. Your thoughts do affect your emotions, which affect your behaviors. Your thoughts affect your behaviors in turn affect your emotions. It's a really kind of vicious cycle that happens. So that, say I have a young lady that I've been treating now for 5 years, who has obsessive compulsive disorder. And she has this thought that if she touches something, she'll become contaminated, okay? I do have her on Prozac, she's responding to that, but I've done a lot of cognitive behavioral work with her about exposing herself to certain situations and titrating that very slowly. No different than if you go to a dermatologist and say you're allergic to, I don't know, grass or what have you, and they will, you know, slowly give you an antigen that has to do with grass, and they'll increase that up slowly and slowly till you build up a resistance. And I would work with her thoughts, how it affects her emotions and her behaviors. And she came in this week, and we were talking, and she was very anxious about a class she was in. She's gone and she got her driver's license. She's going to be graduating in the springtime and everything. Very shy gal. And she was very anxious in a class that she has to engage and talk with other students and the professor as well. And she presented the situation, and I broke it down with her. I said, now tell me, what were you thinking? What was this person doing and what have you? What were you feeling? What were your behaviors? I took a good 40 minutes in breaking it down and processing that with her. And doing that enabled her to gain some cognitive control of how she could handle that, situation. And I gave her examples. When you did this and this and this and this, you could have done this, okay? And that will free you up from your not resistance, your hesitancy to want to speak and what have you. She had it all right in her head, but she was so nervous about sharing that and exposing herself. And she left, you know, filled with ideas, and was in a good way going to address that. But that's what I really focus. I don't do a lot of therapy. I have select patients that I do, but I really work with people on cognition and behavior. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy, and that was slides that I did skip there, okay? I'm going to skip that. Cognitive distortions, and we could go over that at some point in time, but these really trip us up, huh? How about the mind reading? You see this in couples. They've been together like 20 years. I don't need you to say what you're thinking, me. I know what you're thinking. Oh, you do? We assume, huh? We make these assumptions. We do some mind reading, or we base our what's going on based on our emotions. Or I have this patient that disqualifies anything that I say to her. Anything. She's about 70 years old. She disqualifies everything. Overgeneralization, catastrophizing, and what have you. For the sake of time, we can't go into all of this, and there's more of them. Taking a look at your thoughts. And this is a exercise I will do with people in terms of having them take a home and exercise. What are their thoughts, and therefore how they feel, you know? This is about how to counter negative thoughts. This is about dealing with cognitive distortions. Then I do have a handout here for you for, oops, excuse me, let me back up. Assertive communication and how to go about asserting oneself versus, you know, being a wallflower, just stepping back. There's a dialogue guide. This is a great guide that I could use as well if we were to have some presentations down the road on couples work and what have you. I'm not going to get into that, but I did want to at least end with digital medicine. There are a lot of apps out there, aren't there? Huh? That people go to. We need to be really careful about this. And so I just wanted to give you a little insight about that. Yes, they're more accessible, you know. They're affordable. They're free. A lot of them are free, actually. Huh? Their accuracy, well, it's a question there. They're convenient, you know. They're relevant. You have to be concerned with the safety as well. But I did want to talk about that here. Digital mental health treatments, okay? They're accessible, okay? However, they're not vetted in terms of, are they effective? You know, is there somebody going to benefit from it? Are they safe? Are they useful and what have you? If you're looking at digital apps, and it is going on because what's happened with COVID, Zoom meetings, and people are saying going to apps and what have you. But digital therapeutics, okay, is a vetted, if you see DTX, that is a vetted type of app that you can depend on, as well as a medical advice software. This especially has to do with giving medications and compliance, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So you want something that is vetted either through this digital therapeutics or this medical device software as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about an example here about a medication called Abilify. Here we go. Yes, and so see some of the issues you really have to look at is quality control. Are they vetted? You know, privacy. What are they going to do with that data if you have to, you know, enter some data in there? You know, patient safety, and you know who owns all that data in the long run and what have you. By the way, you know that. What do they call that? That you go and you want to know about your ancestry, huh?
Oh, Ancestry.com?
Yeah, .com and those type of things. that information, whether you like it or not, is being used. It's being used to basically understand, you know, and if you get this broad understanding of, say, somebody who has Parkinson's disorder, and you can collect that data, you're going to learn a lot in terms of genes and what have you and how they function. So in closing, here is an example. And you're going to say, wow, this is really an invasion. But, you know, the patient has to have informed consent, sign off on it. You know, they're not pressured to do it, okay? And so this is Abilify, okay? It's a medication we use. And in that medication, there is an ingestible event marker. There's something in that medication when they take it that they have a patch which will send this, if you will, marker will send some data will be picked up by this patch, and then that will be sent to some software, okay? And then they can monitor compliance. Did you follow that? So you take a pill. This is Abilify. I use Abilify. I've not used any of this. I've not had compliance issues, but you take this pill, and inside the pill, there is a marker which can be then picked up in a signal. It'll be sent to a database, and then they can monitor your taking it. Because what? If you've absorbed, if you've taken it, ingested it, they know that, correct? Okay. So here's the adherence to ingestion. Okay? Here's the adherence to ingestion. And these are whether the person has a bipolar disorder, whether they have a major depression disorder, whether they have schizophrenia, and the total, if you will. This would be the total. So let's take somebody who's depressed. In this situation, almost 92% of people took it, okay? 92% of people took it. They were able to know that through the marker in the medication. And in terms of patch wear, they kept the patch on so that the signal would be sent to the patch, which would be then sent to the database gathering. They kept the patch on. And so there was compliance. I struggle with it a little. It's a little invasive if you think about it. But what we're beginning to look at is digital medicine. And I think we need to go slow with this and be very, very careful about this. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts of what can happen. But digital medicine and digital treatment can help in terms of assessment, screening, monitoring, and treatment. And there are so many technologies now that they have that they can, look, they can use facial recognition, okay? They can use gestures and body language. They can use your, what we call prosody, your emotion in your speech and what have you. So look at this. If you have a GPS, that can be used as a database, can it? To know where you've been, right? And say if you're isolating, okay, and you agree to this is all informed consent, you agree to it and what have you, they can help you in terms of looking at, are you just staying at home, you know, using a GPS. They can look in terms of your activity, your call logs, okay? Not what you said. They can look at your call logs. This is all, if you wish, this is some of the technology that's there. They can look at your email.
Behaviors will help them know.
Yes.
Yourself into a bad
Yes.
state.
Yeah.
Change your practice.
Yeah. And to that end, you know, you can agree to say, let's do this for a month, Tom. We're going to do this for a month, and we're going to gather this data, okay? You're signing off. It's only going to be, it's going to be very private, but it's used just for that to help you in understanding how you though day to day, what you're doing and not doing, that might be contributing to not having the quality of life and what might be contributing to your depression, okay? You're right. And they can look at light sensors, you know, in terms of your sleep, how often you use the app, Bluetooth and what have you. So they can look at phone use, sleep, social activity, your walking and what have you, and they can look at that in terms of how all of that might contribute to this. Isn't that amazing? It's gathering a database, okay? And it's all using this technology. I think it can be used so long as, you know, for me, if I were going to use this with an individual, and there are apps and places you can buy in to do this, it would be for a limited point of time, only for that reason, to gather the data, to help them understand, because you know, you can, you know, say, well, gee, we know what your activity is like. What do they have, those step things? What do they call them? They can measure your steps. Yeah. Yeah, and then I see on TV now they have this new ring, Aurora, is it called? That measures so many different things, huh? Yeah. So,
I think young people that are struggling with depression, anxiety, stress, they would probably do this quickly.
yeah.
Whereas the older, this is all scary stuff. They're not into technology.
That's right, yeah. That would be me. I'm not a big technology fan, but I think there is some utility in it. But again, there's some caution here about where's this data going to, what are the limits of it, privacy and all of that kind of stuff you really need to think about. And again, this all should be vetted, that type of app that's being used. Certainly the medicinal treatment apps, you know, like with a medication or something like that, you know, that's almost like you're signing, it's informed consent, you're agreeing to treatment, you know, it's really protected in that way. So I put this up here in terms of digital medicine because that's what we're going to be seeing more of in terms of targeting or treating depression and what have you. So in closing, emotional faces here. Very, very, very interesting. And basically, it's emotional face memory task. And what they're doing with people who are depressed, okay, is using cognition and recognizing faces, okay? So they show this face, then they give a blank, then they show this face, okay? Then they ask, does this face match that face? You know what you're using? You're using your frontal lobes. And what happens, we talked earlier on Tuesday, the first day, what happens to people's concentration and focus when you're depressed? Goes down, okay? And what did I share about if this is hypofunctioning and not working, and I said the area of the brain that has to do with more mood is hyperfunctioning, okay? It affects your thinking and basically your cognition kind of goes offline. Well, here they're strengthening an individual's cognition by doing this, okay? And the results, okay, it's kind of a cognitive process, is here we have this emotional face recognition. This is a scale, it's called the Hamilton Depressant Scale. So you can see here that an individual who was in part of the control group, what was the level of decrease in depressive symptoms, okay, versus the individual who did emotional face recognition, that they had a greater decrease in depressive symptoms by enhancing, okay, the frontal lobes. Because as I said before, the frontal lobes are so important in terms of the executive function in planning, comprehending, prioritizing, discernment, choice, and all of that. What it does, it has nerves that go down into the emotional area of the brain that that put the brakes on our emotions. So if you're enhancing this, the frontal lobes, you are now creating more of a damper on those emotional the emotions that are, if you will, more reactive, if you will. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And so I put this up here, Brain HQ, that I found, and it's so interesting about attention, brain speed, memory, and people skills, navigation, intelligence. And you can go on there, you can click this on, and it'll give you a list of things that you could go through. If you go and click on attention, it'll have a bunch of real neat things in terms of enhancing your attention. Here we go. Am I going? Oh, I'm going backwards. Yes. Forgive me. Yes, here we go. Yes, Brain HQ. You know, just Google that, Brain HQ. And it's free and it's all there. And has a number of things on all of those categories that can be helpful in terms of enhancing your cognitive function, your looking at your mood, your memory, and what have you. Pretty interesting stuff. And I put this here, that's the Substance Abuse Hampshire and the National Institute of Mental Health. A lot of those studies that I took were from there. They were free and what have you. So that's the end of the presentation. I knew I, again, threw a lot at you and what have you. And oh my, I went and
Thank you very much.
went and put a lot out there. Thank you. Any questions? Any thoughts in closing here about what was shared tonight? So again, remember, medicines is one piece of the pie. I tried to.
How do we get more frankincense?
Isn't that frankincense nice? It just begins to. It'll stay with you. It stays with me through the day. Yeah.
She just asked how much. That's what I was thinking. How much is it for one of those?
Oh, it's not. Where is this, Jim? It's not that expensive. It's very concentrated. This is a pure oil. I mean, you know. So this is about. I think this one's about $17.
Where can you get that?
Down on in Montpelier. It's called Aromatherapy. Okay, Lauren Andrews owns it. She used to. No, you know when you go down the street from Sarducci's and then you take a left, the one that goes to the State Street there. Okay, you just take that left and it's probably 3 or 4 stores on your left. And she's very knowledgeable.
I think my husband went there to get some cream for his arnica.
Okay. Yeah, she sells CBD oils and what have you, and actually. Yes, yeah, no. She's right there, lovely gal, and actually when I was running the psych unit, she approached me and said, gee, Jim, do you mind, she's a nurse, do you mind if I introduce and bring this into our program, essential oils? I said, no, let's go for it. And she's got all the oils there, and you can smell them and what have you. As I said, my wife has, I have the remains of all of her essential oils and you know, the books she bought about essential oils and what have you. And yeah, you can get frankincense there. I think there's about $17, something like that, $16.
It belongs to
Young Living, yeah. Those? Okay.
A lot of their products.
You brought it online too.
Yeah, yeah. Young Living's good.
Some of the oils aren't as good.
Right. Young Living is very good. I know that, yeah, Lena's mom, Jen, I think she sells Young Living. My wife has a lot of Young Living, and I haven't gone through there when I need to get a refill of frankincense or myrrh. I bought some rose, which is really lovely. But I get it from Lauren, you know, I'll just go down there. But you can get it online, but you want to get it from a reputable place that it's truly an essential oil. It's not, you know, it's not diluted, you know. Yeah, great.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, Danielle, I'm going to start wrapping up stuff here. try to do this stuff they usually do downstairs.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how many people were online? Or
How many people online tonight? Yeah. And there's other people that are, for instance, Danielle Hampton is down in Kentucky, and she wanted to see, I sent her the second presentation.
Oh, yeah.